Welcome to the Think Factory podcast. We got one question for you. What keeps you up at night?
Welcome back to the Think Factory podcast, powered by OGC Solutions. I'm Chris Santomassimo, your host today. Sitting here with you today is Chris Foster. Chris is the Vice President Business Development for Modern Postcard, which is based out in Carlsbad, California. So we are doing a coast-to-coast podcast today. Welcome, Chris.
Nice. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. I've said it 200 times now. I just love when I'm able to get some really interesting folks like yourself on the podcast to talk about really how you're powering marketing. And I'm proud to say that today is an episode that I would summarize as highlighting the power of print, meaning that print really is one element of sort of a holistic marketing process that both service providers and product manufacturers use for their marketing. But the most traditional of the channels, so to speak, in an omni-channel marketing campaign really is the one with the most staying power and how it links everything else together and really strengthens the entire chain. Modern Postcard is certainly at the forefront of that, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that, as well as telling us a little bit about Modern Postcard.
Well, thanks so much, Chris. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I love the conversation. I think that it's easy to get lost in the weeds of all the digital marketing communications that are out there. And to take that analogy further, it's like a forest. There are so many different areas of digital marketing, and if anyone goes to martech.com and looks at the list of MarTech platforms that are out there, it's in the tens of thousands in terms of what someone has to deal with within the digital marketing realm. From email to social, to TikTok, to CTV, to retargeting efforts, to pro-targeting efforts, to chats, to so many ways in which customers are being touched. That, to take this forest analogy, direct mail is like the oak in the forest. It's just there. It's persistent. It has been persistent, and it continues to drive response. I'd like to wind the clock back a little bit. For those marketers who are old enough, remember when there were fewer channels, and let's say a brand might have $100 of budget to spend. Well, that $100 was broken up into a pie of maybe 8 to 10 slices, right? You had TV, you had billboards, you had direct mail, you had maybe some radio, maybe there was the beginnings of some online, there was newsletters, there were these various things that they could work on. But imagine now, you wind the clock forward, that pie is still only $100, right? Brands don't have more proportional budget to spend than they did before. It's just that instead of an 8-slice pie, it's an 800-slice pie, right? There are so many channels to work through. And so what we've found is that print and direct mail still has the same psychological impact on consumers, right? You can hold it in your hand. You are touched at the household, not at the device level. There's a brain chemistry connection that happens when you hold on to print. It connects into they've done the brain studies, and it connects into a really deep part of the brain, and the amygdala and the hippocampus, kind of that memory and emotional piece where you're holding something physically, you're reading it, it's connecting to your hand and connecting to your head. It's different. It's just different biologically when you read this kind of content than when you scroll or you look at a post on your phone or the like. So there's just something there. So none of that has actually changed, right? That's still as persistent and as effective as it has been. What has changed is all the noise around it, right? So attention spans are dropping. We know that the algorithms of Facebook and Google, they're a black box, which they should be. Facebook owns their own algorithm. Right. Do you as a brand know who you're actually reaching? Oh, not really. You have an audience and you think you know who you're reaching, but you don't actually know the person that you're reaching. And with Google, the PPC rates are driven not necessarily by you, they're driven by their competition, by everything out there. And so where direct mail has a unique contrast to some of these digital challenges is that The pricing is very transparent. It's a price per piece. The postage rate is the postage rate, et cetera. And you're reaching households, not necessarily devices. They've done the studies, and typically what happens, Chris, is that about 78% of mail stays in the household for at least 2 weeks. About 48% stays within, maybe 3 to 5 days. It just hangs around in the house, whereas typical posts maybe get 5 seconds or 3 seconds. I know that TikTok now has ads that are 30-second ads, 15-second ads, 5-second ads, right? These hooks to bring people in. So I think to answer your idea or respond to your idea about how print just still is around and is an effective channel, it absolutely is. Is it the primary channel getting the primary budget for most brands? Probably not anymore, but that's fine. For some brands, it is. For some brands, they can't survive without the direct mail channel. But for most brands, what they're finding out, Chris, is how do I leverage print and direct mail specifically in the mix of all of my other marketing? Where does it work best? To whom does it work best? What's the timing, and what product of mine does it actually make a lot of sense to use the direct mail channel?
And really, it could be at either end or even in the middle sometimes of the entire process of marketing, right? It can either start the thinking process of a consumer, it can follow up in the middle based on reactions to some of the digital channels, or it might be sort of the bookend on the end of the process that actually motivates the consumer to actually make a purchase, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So what we like to talk about with the funnel is that direct mail is actually a full funnel solution. So there's acquisition of new customers. There is the retention, or there's the retargeting, I should say, in that mid funnel. And then there finally is the retention at the bottom. And the way Modern does this is that for their acquisition program, we have what we call batch mailings. And batch mailings is that traditional direct mail. You have 5,000 pieces, 10,000, 50,000, et cetera. And typically what we do, Chris, is we say, let's take a look at your very best customers. And then we're going to create a model of who actually those folks are. And then we create an acquisition list based on their best customers. So it's similar to what you're doing in Facebook in terms of creating your ICP or ideal customer profile and finding a prospect. It's just that we're connecting to households, not just devices. We also have automated direct mail programs for acquisition where you can, instead of mailing 10,000 cards at a time, you can mail 100 cards a day for 100 days. We have job site radius mailing. So if you're in the contracting business or home services and you finish a job, you can instantly mail to the 200 nearest homes around where you just serviced, right? So there's some acquisition programs that have been extremely effective, and still to this day, direct mail is the most effective channel for acquisition. You know that email is the worst channel for acquisition because, just as think about it with people, they say, Forbes says you get about 5 to 10,000 digital impressions a day. We know as consumers, we get hundreds of emails a day. Right. In your mailbox, you probably get a half a dozen, maybe a dozen direct mail pieces a day, not very many. So the competition for attention is so much less when you're doing this for acquisition. So that's kind of the top of funnel acquisition play. We find that if you're a brand that has a product that's maybe $70 or more, and that your lifetime value for that customer is over $300, direct mail is a terrific place for you. So that's kind of the top of funnel. The mid funnel is the retargeting funnel, and that's where we can do things like website retargeting, email retargeting, call center retargeting. So if you have a website, of course everybody does, someone comes to your site and doesn't buy, instead of just doing only Facebook retargeting and digital retargeting, you can add direct mail retargeting. We match about 50% of website visitors to their home address, and can target the households of the people who visited your site and didn't buy. So they're already interested, and this has been an extraordinarily effective channel, especially for e-commerce, retail, and home services. It's been phenomenal, and the return on ad spend for this, Chris, has been the likes I've never seen before with different marketing campaigns. And then lastly, like you mentioned about full funnel, lastly is retention, right? So doing timed retention for upsells and cross sells based on what the customer purchased and when they purchased. Those are all things we can do in traditional and automated direct mail.
How do you identify website visitors that don't fill out your contact form?
Great question. It's a cookie-based product. So that what happens is we put a tag on a website, and then when someone hits that tag, it connects to about 1,800 different data provider subscribers that person is already opted into, or they've given their name and they've given their address. I think of it like a subscription to Wall Street Journal and New York Times or Washington Post or Netflix, or areas where you've already put your information in an opt-in way. There's a whole data network that collects that data, and that's the source that we use.
That's amazing. And what I like about it is that it's going to be a lot more, a lot more effective than the cookies, as you mentioned, because that to a lot of people is going to create an annoyance if there's no interest today in that product or service. Meanwhile, the postcard is going to stay in the house, and you might even keep it as a reference tool, either on the refrigerator or in a file for the next time you need that service, right?
100%. Also, too, look, I'm a consumer. We all are. If I take a look at a product online and it's in the afternoon, I check it out, and then I go home and I'm cooking dinner, and I get an ad for that product, like we do, right? You go to a website and you get the ad for the product you just looked at. Well, Chris, I wasn't ready to buy that a couple of hours ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not ready to buy it now. Like in the 2 hours, did my mindset as a consumer really change? Really?
Right.
So sometimes the impressions that are sent are just a bit too soon. So we arrive several days later. So the mail's out the next day. So there's still a lot of relevance. It's just not as immediate. The other thing we find too is just from the data side, we've seen the engagement rate, meaning that return to website rate, meaning how many people who received a card came back to the site. Well, Chris, for retail, on average, it's almost 20% of the people who receive the card go back to the site, right? Its averages between maybe 17 to 32%. So we call it, say, 20%. It's easy math. So to compare that to digital retargeting, for digital retargeting, all the studies have indicated it's about 7 out of 1,000 people who click on that ad and go back to the website for digital retargeting. So that's 7 out of 1,000. Meanwhile, for direct mail retargeting, it's 200 out of 1,000 that come back. It's just so dramatically different in terms of being able to drive people back to the website. So that's what we've seen it to be such a powerful channel. And especially retargeting makes all other channels better, because any retail brand's primary job for their acquisition marketing is to drive people to the website. Facebook, Google, the spends, the TikTok ads, it's all driving people to that site. The question is, conversion, right? Still less than 2% of all people going to the site actually buy. So that's at 98% of the people that you're scrambling to try to get back to purchase while they're looking at competitors, right? And so that's where we found the direct mail retargeting to be so effective.
But you're also further empowering the process by being more strategic about the data sets that you use to print or to determine the addressees of the pieces.
100%.
I love what you said about the contractor who does a job in a neighborhood, and you're going to then send out to the 200 closest houses to where that job was. That to me is really just I hate the phrase putting on steroids, but we'll say it here. It's putting on steroids the normal word of mouth that happens in a neighborhood sometimes when you're happy with a contractor and everybody else all of a sudden realizes, oh, I need something else done at my house and I forgot the name. What's the name? Your postcards actually provide them with the information that they're going to keep and probably use.
Absolutely. And I think, your point on the data is a really keen observation, Chris, because the technology exists now so that data is just so much better. So our acquisition traditional direct mail programs, we can get access to over 60,000 different types of consumer lists and consumer files. And the data is extremely precise. Do they have dogs? Do they make $225,000 to $275,000 a year? Do they have kids age 6 through 8? Are they living in this type of house that's worth this amount of money, or this kind of bedrooms? I mean, it's so precise in terms of what you can get from an acquisition standpoint. And then also on the automated direct mail, there are a variety of what we call trigger data sets that are used. So just for the audience, automated direct mail is driven by a data set that is kind of what we call a subscription, right? We subscribe to a data set that any type of trigger that happens pushes that data over to us. I'll give you a good example. A new home buyer program that we have is a trigger data set where every new home buyer that shows up in the zip code area that you're looking for, whether it's local, regional, or national, is suddenly then sent to us on a daily basis. So every day we're getting the data of the households that match your criteria, right?
Wow.
And now that kind of trigger data could be a new home buyer. It could be someone who's been recently married. It could be someone who's had an anniversary. It could be someone who recently has had a baby as a new family. So these triggers come through on a daily basis or a weekly basis based on how often the data is collected. And that makes for very precise targeting for these folks. And these automated programs then run every day or every week based on the data that comes in. So it's an evergreen marketing program that customers can take advantage of. The website retargeting data is one of those data sets, right? It's triggered by the customer behavior going to the website and going to various pages on the site to trigger the launch of the card.
Interesting. You know, I'm curious. I'm curious about a lot of things in your experience, so I'll try and take them in order. How about business to business sales, though? I think it's obvious when you've got a business to consumer sale of what the power is, but how do you see it on the business to business side?
Great question. B2B is very interesting with direct mail because as a business professional, I'm sure, I know I do, so I'm assuming that you do, you get a lot of emails from people you don't know.
Yeah. And I usually mark them junk, by the way, if I don't know.
We get a lot of emails from people who find our list, find our email, and almost half the LinkedIn correspondence I get are people pitching me. So B2B direct mail is something that is it's a higher level touch. And we do it several ways. One is pure acquisition, where we're mailing to the office. And it's true, there are folks that are hybrid offices, and we totally understand that. There are data sets we can get at-home executives, so we can mail to their house. But typically B2B, we send to the office, with the exception of retargeting, and I'll get to that later. But the B2B works really well when it comes to CRM exports, right? So if you have a list of leads, if you've got a list of existing customers, and you're wanting to mail to those folks, it works great. And the B2B traditional direct mail is fantastic for brands that are doing equipment, for brands that are doing software, for brands that are doing events, anything that's going to be a higher ticket item or investment. We've seen fantastic response. And in fact, almost 20% of our own business that we do for Modern Postcard is in the B2B space. I did mention retargeting. The reason it's interesting is that on the B2B side, we only mail to personal home addresses. So even if someone from a B2B standpoint is doing the retargeting program, we're mailing to that customer's home, which actually we find to be very effective as well. Because in today's environment, we actually never really stop working, and getting business correspondence in home now is perfectly normal.
Well, it's more likely to be noticed, I would think, as well. You come home and you sift through the mail and you see something interesting. Your attention is focused at that point, as opposed to being busy at work.
That's correct, 100%.
That's smart. And so whether it doesn't matter the context, B2C, B2B, what's your experience in terms of the best way to continue the omni-channel journey from the postcard? Is it QR codes? Is it web links? Is it landing pages that are identified in the piece? What's the magic to keep the conversation going?
The magic is kind of all of the above. And I think the best brands and the best marketers, as you know, will test to figure out what's best for them. QR codes are great if your expectations are correct. The most responsive QR codes are the ones that are public facing. They're digital out of home, they're direct out of home, they're in sports arenas, they're in bus stops, they're in restaurants, they're in these large areas where if you're in an arena and at a sports game and it says, hey, register to win a free jersey, and this big QR code pops up, it's going to get a lot of clicks and a lot of views. With direct mail, it depends on what the user wants to do, right? If the user receives a direct mail and there's a big QR code that says, 5% off. It's not really compelling for me to click the QR code. Whereas there's another brand that had a backpack, very popular backpack, and it was a big QR code about 5 inches on the back side of the card, and it said 50% off only when you scan this QR code. Well, they're marketing backpacks to teenage girls. That is a perfect use for QR codes because they're on their phones anyway. They're going to click on that. They go right to the page where the coupon 50% off is embedded in. They show their mom and dad and they hit buy, right? So that's a great use for QR codes. Oftentimes folks then want to say, well, gosh, I'm going to bank all of my attribution and my measurement on the QR code. I'll tell you, that is a mistake. Most, close to 25 to 40% of consumers don't actually enter in coupon codes or don't actually do that. So what we do, Chris, is we say, okay, well, how do you follow this all the way through? Absolutely have a QR code to send them to a landing page. Absolutely have a phone number. Absolutely have a URL. But, human beings are human beings. They're going to see a card. They might not act in the moment. They're going to hang it around. They're going to finish up their stuff. They're going to do their day. They're going to live their life. And then when they have a pause, they're going to come back and they'll be like, oh, that's right. I really want to go into this. So what do? They go into their laptop or their phone and they type into the search bar the name of the brand, right? And they just go in that way because the card prompted them. And there might be a promotional code that they can use, but it always drives people back to engage with that brand to buy. So I think what we always recommend is have everything. Have a phone number, yes, have a QR code, yes, have a URL. You just don't know when that customer is going to act, right? Because with Facebook, when that ad is delivered, the time of day, various things about it. You don't know when that customer is actually going to take advantage of the card in their home.
Yes, I think you would expect sometimes for there to be somewhat of a lag. You generally know within a couple of days when the postcard likely arrived, and it may take a little bit of it may take some time to motivate the purchase to then take the action, right? So I would suspect some customers maybe get a little frustrated because they're not seeing a tidal wave within the first 36 or 48 hours in some cases.
That's a great insight, Chris. The expectations are different because it's a totally different channel. When you push an email out, 72 hours afterwards, you're done, right? There's no more responses coming after that email. That email is within the first 18 hours that you see a spike and then it kind of dribbles away. Same is true with a Facebook ad, unless you're doing it repeated, because if you don't catch it when they're looking at their phone and they're kind of scrolling through, they're not going to see it. The same is true with emails, right? I know that as a consumer, I have a special email account for my brands that I buy from. I'm getting 25 emails within 90 minutes, right? And then if I don't see it at that moment, it's gone completely. But for the direct mail to hang out, it really is then incumbent upon that user to say, when do I want to take advantage? When do I want to do the call to action? Especially, Chris, if it's a considered purchase. If it's a purchase that's in the hundreds or the thousands of dollars, very rarely is that going to be as spontaneous. Oh my gosh, I got the postcard. I have to buy. Right?
Yeah.
Right? It just doesn't happen. So to your point, marketers that use direct mail, we tend to say, look, it's a long-term program. What you end up seeing is incremental lift over time. So for us, we have a process called matchback analysis. And matchback analysis is one of the truest ways to determine attribution. You have a mailing list that we mail to, so we know exactly which households. We have addresses, and then we have a transaction file that the client sends us. Once we match up that transaction file to the mailing list, we're conclusively seeing which of those folks who received the mail piece actually bought. And sometimes it takes a while. So our matchbacks don't even begin until 30 days after the mailing launches. And then we typically say we'll wait 45 days and then do 60 and then do 90, because that's when you really see the true performance.
Right. It's almost, I was trying to think of an analogy, and I almost think about when you see a professional golfer tee off, you watch the ball kind of go straight out for a while and then gets lift in the air.
Right.
That's how I would describe the direct mail campaign sometimes.
Actually, that is a beautiful analogy. I've never heard that before. It's the drive. It's not the putt.
There you go. Nice. One of us should trademark that phrase afterwards.
I'll give it to you. That's yours.
Nice. You know, I think one thing that's important for a lot of folks is security as well. To your point earlier about some of the emails you get, the text messages that you get, you delete them because, at least in my case, sometimes you just can't tell if they're legitimate or not.
Right.
But direct mail to me is way too complex and probably too expensive for a lot of scammers to take advantage of. I think that's something that people ought not to forget too.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great point. And I think that in today's privacy laws, the one thing that direct mail offers is it's completely privacy, compliant because you have the address that you're sending the mail to, but
Right.
also your competitors don't see it, right? Your competitors don't see your digital ads, right? There isn't that possibility of getting fake bot traffic. There isn't the possibility of the inaccuracies of either delivery or response. So in a lot of ways, it's actually a very true, pure channel, an accurate channel in terms of reaching folks. And of course, with the direct mail retargeting, everything we do is privacy compliant. Anybody who has been to a website in the last 4 years have seen these big buttons that says, I agree in terms of the cookie policy, and 99.9 out of 100 people click the I agree, and then you moves on. So there, it hurdles that
Right.
privacy challenge or question. But I like what you said about that, and that's the thing about direct mail, Chris, is that for digital marketing natives that aren't familiar with direct mail, it's just a different channel than anything digital. It has, every channel has strengths and weaknesses. Everything does, right? And so they say, like a ballet dancer pound for pound is the strongest person on earth, yet powerlifters are extremely strong. Their strength is just different, right? With direct mail, the idea is, how do I best leverage the strength of direct mail and add it to the mix of all of my other digital marketing, time it well and target it well? And I think customers will be surprised and delighted about how responsive and effective it is if they've never tried it before.
Yeah, and I think like anything else, to do a direct mail campaign without some attached digital strategy to it is probably not as effective as it could be. Just like doing digital without the more traditional component is not as good as it should be. So really, it's about just attaching things that are going to help one bolster the other and work in tandem with each other because we are digital creatures, but we're also traditional creatures at the same time.
Yeah, we're human beings. I mean, in the end of the day, we're human, which is awesome. but just, and we think about this though, we've been reading for, hundreds of generations, right? So the
Right.
advent of reading started about 5000 BCE. And so for hundreds of generations, we've been reading things physically. But Chris, as human beings, we've only been on the interwebs for 2 generations. That's it.
Right.
Right. So our brains are still processing. And look, Gen Alpha and Gen Z are digital natives and they get it. They think faster. They think in the digital world. But there's still a place on the print side that combines with the digital to create an entire impression of a brand. And to your point, one of the things that we like to do is encourage customers to combine digital and print. So what we're able to do is we're able to take a mailing list and turn that mailing list into what we call geofence addressable digital ads. So we are targeting the people who are on the mailing list with digital ads. It just helps lift that performance, right? And it's a way for them to work together. So often digital marketing is with a quote unquote audience. And even if you have emails or hashed emails that you're throwing into the algorithm, it's still approximating those folks to the audience versus actually reaching the true households that you're targeting with those digital ads. So it's just a very different mindset and a different targeting capability that you have when you target a household.
For sure. And Chris, what can we expect to see in the short term and maybe the medium term from Modern Postcard in terms of new services, new offerings, or tweaks to your existing portfolio?
Oh, great question. Thanks for asking. We offer the traditional direct mail like we know, plus the automated direct mail, and then the integrated direct mail, which is where I talk about adding digital ads to the direct mail program. What you can expect from Modern is a variety of services that a customer can use and take advantage of direct mail. So it's not a one size fits all. And in terms of upcoming services, we are increasing the array of automated direct mail that we're doing by finding new data partners and new data triggers. So for example, one of the new ones we put together is the anniversary program, so that if you're a jeweler, for example, and you have multiple stores throughout the country, or you're local or regional, we can find people who are getting ready for that 10-year anniversary, 20-year anniversary, or even 5-year anniversary, and market to those folks on a weekly basis. You just need a handful of conversions to make that type of program profitable. So as we start seeking out other data partners, we're able to add more automated trigger programs.
One thing I find interesting about your business, Chris, is that among many things, is that companies in your space, especially Modern Postcard, have gone from becoming printers that use data to data companies that happen to print. And right. That's a little bit about what you have here, because you're able to provide that holistic solution.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Chris, because we don't think of ourselves as printers. We think of ourselves as a marketing services company, and actually more niche than that. We think of ourselves as a performance marketing services company, right? And performance marketing starts with data, right? It starts with an audience. It starts with understanding who your target is. We just happen to do performance marketing in a very specific way by using direct mail and a specific digital component to that. So we're not going to be the ones who do CTV ads. We're not going to be the ones who do the streaming OTT. We're not going to be the ones to create a billboard, right? That's not what we're going to do, because that's not necessarily the targeted audience that we can focus on. So it's pretty interesting that you say that, we happen to print postcards, but that's just because it's a great delivery vehicle to reach the target audience that you're trying to connect with.
Right. Well, Chris, thank you so much for sharing all of these insights today. I could sit with you for a whole day, frankly, just talking about the success stories and the technology, and it's fascinating. Doing a great job for your customers, for sure. How can folks reach you and Modern Postcard?
Oh, appreciate that, Chris. So reach out to modernpostcard.com. You can reach me personally, cfoster@modernpostcard.com. I encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn. I encourage you to go to our website and connect with our newsletter. If you do sign up and subscribe, we have a ton of content that we send you that's all educational and informational. In addition, if you go to modernpostcard.com/webinars, you're going to see about 2 webinars a month, where we cover a variety of educational topics that are designed exclusively to make you a better marketer, whether you work with us or not. So we have a lot of educational content available.
Fantastic. Well, I would encourage anybody who listens to the podcast to check it out, not just for the benefit to their businesses, but again, fascinating about how what you do brings together these traditional elements and the psychology all in one place to create an effective marketing campaign. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
That was a blast today. And thanks for joining the Think Factory podcast. I'm Chris Santomassimo, your host, again, with Chris Foster, who's the vice president from Modern Postcard in California. That is Carlsbad, California. And we'll see you next time.